It should have been a regular Thursday. I'd baked too much. Again, and was deciding whether to freeze the extras or drop them off at the church. The house was quiet except for the sound of the radio murmuring old standards in the background. I had no reason to expect a knock at the door, but there wasn't one. There was no call, no message, no warning, just Madeline, curled up like a child behind the glass of the bus stop on Montgomery Avenue, her arms wrapped around her knees, soaked through. The hem of her wedding dress clung to the dirty concrete, and her bare feet were pink from cold. I pulled over without thinking, ran to her, dropped to my knees. She blinked at me slowly, as if waking from a long, bad dream. "Mom," she said, and her voice cracked in half. "I don't have anywhere to go." She hadn't been home in weeks. Said they were figuring things out, and I didn't press. I should have. I wrapped my coat around her shoulders and guided her into the car. She didn't speak again until we were nearly back to my place. "He sold it," she whispered. "The apartment? He said he'd take care of it. I thought he meant repairs. I found out this morning when someone else showed up with a key." I didn't know what to say. She slept in the guest room that night, shivering under quilts, still in that damp dress. I made her tea, but she only held the mug like a shield. I sat alone in the kitchen with the lights off, watching the rain blur the street lamp through the window. They'd bought that apartment with my help. I'd even co-signed the loan. And now she was here, displaced, discarded like furniture left at the curb. I wasn't angry. Not yet, but I would be. And by morning, I'd already made a list of who to call. She told me the night had started like any other. He'd left a note on the counter reservation at 7. Wear something nice. So she did. She curled her hair, put on the same burgundy lipstick she wore on their wedding day, and waited. At 7:15, there was still no sign of him. By 8:00, she found the envelope. Not a card. Not flowers. A manila envelope with her name scrawled across the front. Inside was a single sheet of paper, some kind of notice, and beneath it, the deed transfer, signed, stamped, filed, but not by her. When she told me that part, her voice barely held together. "He said he needed my ID for something at the bank a while ago. I didn't think anything of it." She fell asleep on the couch that night, still curled around the throw pillow like it was holding her together. I waited until her breathing evened out before I slipped into the office. I still had contacts and property records. I called Robert. First, he owed me a favor. Within minutes, I had the public record pulled, and there it was. Seller, Audra Sloan, buyer, out-of-state couple. Not Madeline, not even the husband. Audra Sloan. The name hit like something sour in the throat. Years ago, she and Madeline shared an apartment. There had been tension, then distance. When Madeline started dating Jonah, the friendship ended without much explanation. Apparently, it had never ended for Audra. The sale had closed exactly 15 days earlier. Madeline had no idea. I walked back into the hallway and saw her shoes by the front door, wet, worn, the sole peeling. She'd packed in a rush, left with nothing but a dress and a handbag. But the woman who took her home would not be packing light. I picked up my keys. I had addresses to pull. I parked across from the old apartment and sat in the car for a moment. I used to bring Madeline groceries here when they were first married. We'd sit on the balcony and talk about paint colors and rugs. Now, a construction van was blocking the entrance, and the building looked like it had already begun shedding her memory. The doorman was still the same, older now. He recognized me right away. "They moved out 2 weeks ago," he said with a shrug. "New couple bought the place. Said they're knocking down a wall. Something about adding a nursery." I smiled politely, thanked him, and walked away before he could see my jaw tighten. At the county clerk's office, I waited in line behind a man arguing about parking violations. When it was my turn, I gave the address and paid the copy fee. The deed was printed on thick, official paper watermarked, sealed, and notarized. I scanned it slowly, line by line, and there it was, scribbled in blue ink, Madeline J. Marlowe. Only it wasn't. The loops were wrong. The spacing was too tight. My daughter had a habit of lifting the pen slightly between her D and E. This signature flowed like it had been practiced. Forged. The notary stamp belonged to someone I knew, though not well. A name I'd seen at past certification seminars. She should have verified the signer's identity. She hadn't, or she had and ignored it anyway. I leaned back in my chair, folded the deed, and slid it back into the envelope. They really thought no one would look too closely. They thought Madeline would be too ashamed, too broken to challenge it. They didn't know her mother spent 30 years teaching people how to recognize a lie in ink. I left the clerk's office, stepped out into the wind, and pulled out my phone. There was another document I needed to find, the loan agreement, the one I had signed, back home. I went straight to the file cabinet in my office, the one I kept locked even though no one ever touched it. The folders were arranged by year, by lender, by property. My old habits settling into place as if they'd just been waiting. Near the back, under the paperwork from the year they married, I found it the joint loan application. Madeline's handwriting on the first page, his cramped, uneven scrawl beneath it, and my signature at the bottom, the guarantor. The only reason the loan had gone through was because I'd agreed to stand behind them. He hadn't qualified alone. He barely qualified with both of them. I ran my finger down the margin until I hit the line I needed. Guarantor remains liable until full transfer of title is verified, which meant the bank still considered me part of the transaction, which meant I had every right to question anything that smelled wrong. I called Lena before I lost my nerve. She answered on the third ring, her voice warm as ever. "Celine, everything all right? I need you to pull the mortgage record for Madeline's apartment," I said, "and the most recent transfer request." There was a pause, the sound of keys tapping. "Oh," she murmured. "Well, that explains it. Explains what the transfer was flagged last week. Title insurance is holding it. Something isn't lining up. It's not a full stop yet, but it's close." My grip tightened on the receiver. "Can you keep it there officially?" "No. Unofficially. I can nudge things, but not for long. I only need a little time," I told her. "Just enough to get in front of this. If they had forged my daughter's signature, if they had involved a notary who didn't bother checking ID, then every document tied to that sale was tainted. And because my name was still tethered to the loan, I had room to move, room to push back." Lena exhaled. "You didn't hear it from me." I thanked her quietly and hung up, staring at the loan packet spread open on my desk. Now I needed to find the woman who'd signed her name to the deed. I found her just after noon, stepping out of a cafe on Barclay Street with a coffee in one hand and her phone in the other. Same red heels I remembered from the rehearsal dinner. Same sharp lipstick, hair pulled tight like a crown she dared anyone to question. She didn't notice me at first. She was too busy smiling into her reflection in a parked car window. I waited until she turned toward the lot. "Selling stolen property suits you," I said, stepping out from behind a tree. She froze for half a breath, then smiled like it was a joke. "Oh, Celine, this is all such a misunderstanding. I was just helping Jonah out. It was his idea. He said Madeline was leaving anyway. I didn't say anything. Just let her keep talking. He said you wouldn't get involved. Said Madeline didn't want to make it messy. I thought it was handled." She was fidgeting now, adjusting her bag strap, smoothing her blouse. I pulled the envelope from my coat. "This is from my attorney," I said, placing it in her hand. "I suggest you read it carefully." She blinked. Is this legal action? Your name is on the sale. Your signature is on the title transfer. And the notary who signed off on it is already under review. Audra's face paled beneath the layers of blush. She looked down at the envelope like it might catch fire. I didn't know you did, I said, quiet but firm. You knew exactly what you were doing. You just thought she wouldn't fight back. I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked away, the click of her heels frozen behind me. Let her read every word of that letter alone. Let her sit with the weight of the signatures. The falsified transfer. The buyers now caught in a stalled sale. She wasn't untouchable anymore. And next, I needed to speak to the people who bought the apartment because they were walking into something they didn't deserve. Their names were Evan and Melissa Barnes. Married 3 years, expecting their first child in September. They'd left Denver to be closer to Melissa's parents in Long Island. The apartment was supposed to be a fresh start. They met me at a quiet legal office downtown, nervous but polite. Evan shook my hand with hesitation. Melissa held hers around her belly. Protectively, I saw the tremble in her fingers. I appreciate you meeting with me, I began, unfolding the manila folder on the table. I want to make it clear I'm not here to accuse either of you. You didn't do anything wrong. Melissa nodded, but her lips stayed pressed together. I laid out the documents. The apartment you bought was sold by someone who didn't legally own it. My daughter's signature was forged. The title company has flagged the transaction. It's under investigation for fraud. Evan leaned forward, scanning the signatures. You're saying this isn't hers? No. I taught notarial law for nearly a decade. That's not her writing. And the notary on this form is already being reviewed. Melissa looked up, eyes wide. What happens now? I've filed a complaint with the clerk's office. The title insurance company is holding the transfer. If we act now, you won't be held liable. But if renovations begin, it complicates things. They looked at each other. I saw it: fear, disappointment, a flicker of anger. I know you were excited, but you deserve to build your life in a home that isn't born from theft, I said gently. My daughter lost everything. I won't let you be the next ones caught in this. Evan exhaled slowly. We'll pause everything. We'll call our lawyer today. Good, I said. So will I. We shook hands again before parting ways. I saw Melissa rest her palm over her stomach as they stepped into the elevator. They didn't deserve this mess. But neither did Madeline. And the next step was making sure she'd never be left out of her own home again. Madeline barely touched her tea that morning. She'd taken to walking the garden paths behind my condo, arms folded, head down. She didn't speak unless spoken to, and even then, her voice stayed small, like she was afraid of waking something she couldn't control. She didn't ask about the apartment. She didn't ask what I was doing. I think she thought it was all gone for good, that once someone took something that big from you, there was no getting it back. But I hadn't raised her to believe that. That night, after she went to bed, I stood in the hallway outside her door and listened to her breathing, and I made myself a quiet promise she would never again be locked out of her life. The next morning, I called Lena. I asked her how fast we could legally transfer ownership, not just stall the fraud, but reverse it entirely. We'll need a fresh contract, she said. New paperwork. And your daughter will need to sign this time. With witnesses. I'll handle that, I said. We worked fast. Lena sent over a revised title document with my signature as guarantor and a replacement transaction lined up, one that undid the forged transfer and reinstated the original ownership chain. I didn't transfer it back to myself. I transferred it to Madeline. No tricks. No legal limbo. Just her name. On record. On paper. A few days later, the keys arrived by courier, a fresh set. I placed them in a small white box and set it on her nightstand. She didn't say anything when she saw it, just stared at it for a long time. Later that evening, I found her in the living room, quietly turning the keys in her hand. She wasn't crying, but something in her face had softened. Not everything could be undone, but some things could be reclaimed. The next day, I drove across town. It was time to speak to the man who had started this. He was living in a newer building across the river, all glass balconies and polished walkways, the kind of place built to look expensive even when it wasn't. I waited until Sunday morning to visit. I wanted him off guard, no suit, no mask. He opened the door in sweatpants and an old college hoodie. Hair messy, breath stale with sleep. He blinked at me like I was a ghost. "Celine," he said, uncertain. "You sold stolen property," I replied, stepping forward just enough to meet his eyes. He opened his mouth, the lie already forming. I didn't give him time. I pulled the first envelope from my bag, cease and desist, handed it to him. Then the second, pending fraud notification, marked by the title insurer. Then the third revocation of sale, formally filed by Evan and Melissa. He took each one, slowly, like they weighed more than paper should. "You may want to call Audra," I said. Voice calm. He didn't. He stood in the doorway, lips parted but silent, staring at the stack in his hands. I waited a beat longer. He didn't move, didn't step aside, didn't apologize. He just stood there, holding the evidence of his own undoing. I turned and walked back down the hall, not looking over my shoulder. By the time I reached the parking lot, I could still feel his silence behind me. It was a different kind of quiet than Madeline's, the kind that came when someone realized they'd finally run out of angles. That evening, I got a call from Lena. She said the revocation had gone through cleanly. Title was no longer in dispute. We both knew what that meant. Madeline had her home back, and now it was time for her to see it. A week passed, and the silence changed. The buyers officially canceled. Their lawyer filed the final withdrawal papers. Citing misrepresentation, the title company flagged the transaction, and the lender backed out. The sale collapsed, quietly but completely. Audra disconnected her number. The office line, the personal cell, both gone. She vanished into the same shadows she used to scheme her way in. He called once. No voicemail? No message? I watched the screen flash with his name, and then go dark again. I let it ring out. Madeline moved into the apartment 3 days later. She didn't say much during the move, just carried one box at a time, calm and methodical, like she didn't want to test the weight of it all too fast. The curtains were still gone when we arrived, the windows bare, letting in unfiltered morning light. She stood in the middle of the living room and blinked like she hadn't seen the sun in weeks. Then, slowly, she walked over to the window and reached for the pull rod. The blinds clattered open. Light filled the room. She turned to me and smiled small, tired, but real. "Can I paint the walls?" she asked. It was the first request she'd made in months. "Any color you want," I said. She nodded once, then again, more sure the second time. That afternoon, we sat on the floor with takeout boxes between us, flipping through color samples. She held a soft gray swatch against the wall and tilted her head, imagining it wasn't just a place to sleep anymore. It was hers, not somewhere she'd been left, not somewhere someone else had handed down, but somewhere she could begin again. And the next morning, she picked up a brush. Madeline started filling out job applications on the third day. She spread them across the table like puzzle pieces, reading aloud from job descriptions and asking what I thought. Her voice was steadier. She didn't flinch when I said her name. She made pasta that night, humming to herself in the kitchen. Nothing fancy, just noodles, garlic, olive oil. But the way she moved, the way she smiled when she asked if it needed more salt, told me something important. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was coming back. I returned to my garden that week. The frost had left, and the tulips were finally opening. I trimmed a few stems and placed them in the vase by the window of her apartment. She didn't say anything when she saw them just touch the petals gently and set them in the center of the table. He never followed up. No second call, no lawyer, no letter. Maybe he knew the wall he leaned on had crumbled, or maybe he thought fading into the background would protect him. Either way, I didn't care. The case was closed quietly. Lena sent me a brief email. No fanfare, no statement. Just confirmation that the property was no longer under review. Still, I kept every document. Every notice, letter, signature, labeled, filed, and secured. Because silence can protect, yes, but it can also expose. Some people think silence is weakness, but they forget it's also a choice, a tool, a shield, a way of gathering strength where others expect collapse. Madeline laughed again yesterday at something small, a burned toast or a bird landing too hard on the windowsill. The sound caught me off guard. It wasn't the old laugh. It was something new, and this morning, as I watched her slip on her shoes and head out to her first interview, I realized she wasn't just stepping into the world again. She was stepping into a life entirely her own.